Hello, everyone. More Jabber's Gospel Thoughts. I believe this is the fourth cast. Maybe I should stop numbering them, but for now I will, I guess. So today we're starting the Book of Mormon. I was planning to talk about revealing the Book of Mormon to Joseph Smith in the introduction pages, but I'll talk about it a bit later because I think it works better with another segment I'm planning to do on First Nephi. So let's start with First Nephi. And there is a lot to say about it, but since this is Jabber's Gospel Thoughts, I'm going to talk about the things that impressed me as always as I start talking about this. Now, this is the Book of Mormon. This is being translated in the late 1820s. And really, nobody in the New World had much of an idea about ancient Near Eastern culture other than the things that are in the Bible. There wasn't much archaeological work, I believe, being done. Champollion with Napoleon Bonaparte were already in Egypt in 1820. But that was the beginning of Egyptology. It was still in the very beginning. Why am I saying this? Because one of the things that impress me usually when I open the Book of Mormon is verse 2 of First Nephi, where Nephi is saying, "Yea, I make a record in the language of my father, which consists of the learning of the Jews and the language of the Egyptians." Now, why is that impressive? Because the Jews have in the diaspora they believe their language is called Lashon HaKadosh, which means the holy tongue. So in order to preserve Hebrew letters, wherever Jews went, they spoke the languages of those lands. They kept Hebrew, of course, as a language of worship, but even when they communicated amongst themselves in the languages of the lands that they lived, they developed their own style of communication. So, for example, the Jews of Spain and Portugal developed something called Ladino, which is essentially Spanish mixed with some Hebrew, but the Spanish is written using the Hebrew alphabet. The same thing in Eastern Europe. They developed something called Yiddish, which is a mix of Germanic languages, some Slavic languages, written in the Hebrew letters. And when even they lived among the Arabs, they developed something called Judeo-Arabic, which is Arabic written in Hebrew letters, etc., etc., etc. So Nephi here is writing this book, but he's reflecting on he's writing it in the language he had the learning of the Jews and the language of the Egyptians. So he's basically using something similar. But here, what's interesting when I see some of the characters that Martin Harris took to Professor Anton, and this is something Nibley commented on, the great Mormon scholar Hugh Nibley commented on, is that it looked like Demotic, which is like this sort of old Egyptian writing. But whatever it is, Nephi is using both. He's mixing the learning of the Jews and the Egyptians to write and communicate, which is a very Jewish thing. Now, you have to keep in mind that when the book talks about the language of the Egyptians, that is, if we listen to those who doubt the origins of the Book of Mormon and say, "Oh, Joseph Smith was, creating this," or some of the many theories that doubters use. That would have required lots of chutzpah, lots of daring, lots of audacity to talk about the language of the Egyptians in a book that you're hoping will be forever, and scholars will study your claims and all of that. So you're making this claim. And there is a lot in the Book of Mormon that scholars since then have studied over and over and debated, and the Book of Mormon stood the test of time. Now, someone asked me, and this is not a thought that usually comes to mind, but I'll share this. Someone asked me about the origins of the name Nephi. Now, every name, as I know this is of interest to many people, especially in the church, but for many years now, I've developed this theory, this hypothesis that every name in the Book of Mormon mentioned in the story, especially key characters, their name relates to something that happens in the story, similar to the Bible in a way, but in the Book of Mormon, it's the same. And it's directed towards how this character is manifested. So the name Nephi, for example, there are lots of theories about it, but when I first started reading it, I was like, oh, this is a person in exile. And the word we use in Arabic for it is Nafa or Manfi or Nafi, which means someone who goes to exile or someone who is in exile, which is exactly what happened to Nephi. But then later on, I realized there is also the word Nafa'a because Hunebli and others who studied ancient Egyptian say the word nafa in ancient Egyptian means useful or good or goodness or something like that, which also works because in Arabic it's nafa, and nafa means useful, someone who's good, who's useful. Now, Arabic and Hebrew are cousin languages, and many of the words share common roots. This is not one of them. But as we will see in the story, the Nephites, Lehi's family, associates with a family whose patriarch's name is Ishmael, which they are either Arabs or Jews who lived in Arab areas and spoke some form of ancient Arabic, whatever that was. So this is speculation, but it's fun. And to me, I think these are theories that we need to prove, but just throwing my hat in there. Now, we look at the other names, since we're into names. For example, Lehi. Again, there are theories, but when I started learning Hebrew, the two most sacred letters in Hebrew are the He and the Yud. And when you put them together, this is the name of Heavenly Father. This is basically the sacred name. And so Lehi, the preposition can be Lehi, for God, someone dedicated to God. So again, that is a theory, but that matches very well with Lehi's character. Now, Laman and Lemuel have always been intriguing because that root, LM, Lema, it means the blamers, people who make excuses. And again, this matches their character very well. So as we'll see, as we go through the Book of Mormon, I'll go through these stories and these names and see how they match the stories or not. But these are my thoughts for the day, and more is coming. Thank you.